49ers, long history of in fact, the greatest history of wide receivers in the entire National Football League. Let's rank them out. Who are the top receivers? Of course, we know who's number one, the greatest of all time. Where are the current guys? Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. They do fit into this list. Where is it? On today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there that are subscribed up on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down, sports stop sporting quite like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking everybody up, all the customers at FanDuel getting a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Croc. You're not going to do this thing where you're like, well, I saw more T.O. than Jerry Rice, so I think Terrell Owens is the number one wide receiver of all time for the San Francisco 49ers. Then it's Crabtree because I saw Crabtree more. And you're not going to give me one of those today, are you?
Nah, man, I think
you're all young, Gen Z or something, didn't see Jerry Rice.
I think Jerry Rice is the second greatest athlete of any sport of all time. First is Barry Bonds for me, most dominant player I've ever seen. Second is Jerry Rice. And I know some people be like Wayne Gretzky, Serena Williams, Sidney McCullough. You might not know Sidney McCullough, but she's running the 400 right now, super dominant, right? You're saying both. Like there are some great athletes, but what Jerry Rice was able to do, to have two careers worth of stats, right? Like most people are like, all right, this guy, he's been in the league for 10 years. Look at these crazy numbers. If he does exactly what he did over the first 10 years, for another 10 years, he can catch Jerry Rice. Like that, it's ridiculous. I will not say any receiver over Mr. Jerry Rice.
The Pele disrespect from Croc, naming all-timers. All right, let's go. Jerry Rice is one. He's the GOAT. It's insane what he's doing. He's lapping the field. He's got twice as many receiving yards as other Hall of Fame wide receivers. It's insane what he did throughout his career. Nearly 20,000 receiving yards for the San Francisco 49ers. 19,247. It's a number that will never be touched. And he even did more for other teams after he left the 49ers. After his career from 1985 to 2000 in the Scarlet and Gold. Just a ridiculous player. He is the epitome of a pro, the work ethic. I mean, everything. And
real quick. Are you a fan of the Scarlet and Gold?
You mean the color scheme?
Or those darker.
Scarlet and gold is the hat you're wearing right now.
So not the scarlet then. You know what I'm talking about, like the 90s.
And I'm not a fan. I'm a huge fan of the scarlet and gold. I love the classic colors, the hat you're wearing. You've been rocking that well lately, Croc, I got to say. The classic 80s uniforms that I grew up watching. I don't know if it's because I grew up watching them that I think they're the best, but they are the best. And when they went dark for a while there, everyone went dark. And guess what? Everyone's coming back because they realized it didn't really look that good. Other sports, other teams, other jerseys, everyone's going back to late 80s because those were the prime best uniforms that ever existed in most sports. And that's why teams are going back to those because they just look the best. They're the cleanest. And teams kind of got away. Everyone's like, oh, we got to throw some black. It's got to be a little darker. Got to go this and that. It's like, no, dude, just rock the true colors that your franchise is. For the 49ers, it's scarlet and gold.
What do you think about the disrespect that Jerry Rice gets for dominating the era that he did? And there are a lot of people that say, just first of all, anybody listening, these people are idiots. I don't like calling people out of their names. All right, I don't like calling people out of their names because I know it gets me really riled up. Like, man, I don't ever disrespect anybody. Don't call me out of my name. But I would say these people are probably idiots. But they say Jerry Rice would not dominate in this era. And I'm like, I think you guys got Jerry Rice kind of like mixed up with somebody else.
Right.
When people talk about the greatest receiver of all time, there are a lot of people that will say Randy Moss. And when they're thinking of Jerry Rice, it's like this little receiver that just ran really good routes. And he was able to do it against whoever is playing corner, which I feel like that was just as good of a cornerback era as any year when you got Rod Woodson, Deion Sanders, and all these other Dale Green, right? Like there were some monsters during that time.
When they actually had shut down corners, it was way more difficult to get open back then and hold on to the ball when you got hit versus nowadays.
Right. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that say he wouldn't quite dominate, and I'm like, you guys are going off of I think it's his 40-yard dash time that goes around. So it gives the assumption that he wasn't a great athlete, but nobody worked hard in this guy. He was not little. Like he was 6'2", 200 pounds. Like that's not a tiny receiver. So he's running terrific routes. He was able to win at every level. It's like you put on highlights of Jerry Rice. You see him catching bombs over people. You see him catching posts, go routes. You see him catch slants, outrun everybody. They came up with the yards after catch statistic because of what he was able to do. Even for a guy who they claim was this slow guy, he sure didn't look slow when somebody was chasing him. Like it's like, well, what else do y'all want from him? And I get it. Randy Moss, he's so fast. He jumped, and he's the third greatest receiver of all time. Terrell Owens, number 2. All right, but
spoiler,
the disrespect towards Jerry Rice, man. Like, just what are your thoughts on that? Because I don't know if you're hearing those same conversations or seeing them, but it's like people will choose a lot of other receivers. Oh, I'd rather have Megatron. I'm not taking anybody over Jerry Rice, and he would dominate with his mindset. As long as he had the same mindset, he would dominate in any era because that work ethic, along with whatever ability that he was able to maximize, that made him the greatest of all time, the GOAT, which started with him.
He was the original GOAT. We throw GOAT around too much too. It stays with Jerry Rice, in my opinion. And I agree with everything you said there. And yeah, 6'2", 200. He's the same size as what? Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's not small. In fact, he might have been a little taller than Justin Jefferson. I don't know.
Probably taller and heavier. Justin Jefferson, I think he was listed at like 6'3" at LSU. Then he measures in at the combine. He's like, oh, he's 6'1", which isn't little, but just not as big as Jerry Rice.
Right. Yeah. Jerry had these big, strong hands too. Jerry Rice is the reason people started being like paying attention to more like arm length for receivers and hand size for receivers, right? And all these things that are really important. I think a lot of people just remember 40-year-old Jerry Rice too, and he wasn't nearly as dynamic. And the whole thing about Jerry being slow is one of the biggest myths ever. It's BS. Jerry Rice was fast. They called him Flash 80 because of how fast he was. He ran away from everybody when he was young. He probably didn't have any clue what he was doing when he was running 40-yard dashes, working out for teams. It wasn't the science that it is today. He didn't go work out with a track coach for a month before going and running 40-yard dashes. You got guys with slow fingers and fast fingers and scouts that are there's no like laser time. So you don't really know even the atmosphere he's running in. Different scouts had different numbers. And Bill Walsh and Gil Brandt, who scouted him, who's a scout for the Dallas Cowboys at the time, said he had Jerry Rice at 4.5 on his stopwatch himself. So this whole like Jerry Rice ran a 4.7 is already bogus and BS from the start. Dude was fast, and he's probably has no idea what he's doing running a 40 and has a bad start. He probably didn't have his hand in the ground running a 40-yard dash, and he still ran 4.5s on some people's watches. Jerry Rice was fast, Flash 80, fast. Stop with the slow Jerry Rice stuff. Never happened. Complete myth. We got to debunk that right now.
These people, you got to remember too, in the South, they're really behind on times. Like this dude went to Mississippi Valley State, and I have driven through where Mississippi Valley State is. I don't even remember where I was going, maybe to the Senior Bowl, in Alabama, then driving back through, go to Mississippi, and then, I finally get to Arkansas. Ain't nothing there. Like, there ain't nothing there. And there probably wasn't a whole lot of things to help him prepare. But what he was a terrific football player. Put him on the field. He was dominant. Throw the ball up. He's catching over guys. Throw a slant. He's outrunning guys. Throw the post. And he was just a technician. There was this clip, and we sent it in our group chat. And I was like, man, everybody is clowning these DBs trying to guard Jerry Rice in one-on-ones at practice, because it was practice clips of Jerry Rice running routes. And I'm like, they actually were not bad. Like, for the people that know what they're looking at when it comes to defensive backs, they were patient. They stayed square. They're playing off. Like, it looked good. They're driving. And he just was murdering them at the top of routes. Like, it's not their fault this dude is so great at setting routes up, understanding leverage, and then being able to use that against them, as opposed to just, run some bad routes. I mean, like, what do y'all want him to do? Get locked up? Like, he's not going to. He's the greatest receiver of all time. And but when he retired, greatest football player of all time. Still greatest football player of all time. Right. So, yeah, man, I had to go on that rift because I feel like there's a lot of disrespect towards the OG.
Yep. Jerry Rice, no doubt, greatest of all time. So
he only got those numbers because he played so long. Bro, he got 2 careers worth of numbers. It doesn't matter how long. You could find another receiver, have him play 20 years. He still won't do what this guy did. Over 1,800 yards at the age of 33. Come on, man. Stop playing with this guy.
We saw age 32 Jerry Rice in a 49ers uniform, and we saw age 32 Randy Moss in a 49ers uniform. Randy Moss was completely washed. Randy Moss is ducking when balls are thrown at him over the middle of the field in the Super Bowl because he doesn't want any part of that, right? Jerry Rice was the best wide receiver by a wide margin in the NFL at that same age and had an entire Hall of Fame career to go for the rest of his career for 10 more years. It's not even close. It's not even close. Jerry Rice, all alone by himself, number 1. Pretty good player at number 2 for us on this list. Where did Deebo and Aiyuk rank? Are they all-timers already for the San Francisco 49ers? Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook. Look, we love sports. That's why we're here. We love them so much. We never want them to stop. But as those NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs wind down, we got fewer and fewer games. We do have Major League Baseball all summer long, which I love. And, of course, you can find those lines every single day at FanDuel. But FanDuel is going to help you all out. And when sports aren't sporting quite like you want them to, you can go to FanDuel and you can keep those sports going whenever you want. Because all you got to do is open the app and dream up any bets you want whenever you're in the mood. And all customers, not just new customers to FanDuel, all customers get a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Not just Major League Baseball, but how about some of those NFL 2024 props? Brandon Aiyuk, 1,000.5 yards is the over and under for his 2024 season. Deebo Samuel, 775.5 yards is his over-under for receiving total in 2024. So you can bet on that. Rookies of the year, who's going to win the next Super Bowl? Head over to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And number 2 is got to be Terrell Owens. Another Hall of Fame wide receiver. It was unbelievable. I almost felt bad because Terrell Owens was really hitting his stride and becoming one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL, surpassing Jerry, while Jerry was late career a San Francisco 49er. And wasn't it Jerry Rice's last game as a 49er that T.O. broke the receiving record for catches in a game, had 20 catches? I was like, this isn't your day, T.O. It's supposed to be Jerry's day.
That had to be a little awkward, especially for someone like Jerry Rice. Like, we know he's the ultimate competitor. Yep. We know how he feels about himself. And I'm pretty sure we know how he feels about his time as a 49er. And on a day that was obviously the last day of him wearing a 49ers uniform, for Terrell Owens to catch 20 passes where, he could say, or they could look at it as like a passing of the torch, but that wasn't a passing of the torch. That was just Terrell Owens dominating. Jeff Garcia, if there's any a-hole in this situation, it's probably Garcia because he just kept feeding Terrell Owens. But
all the 80, man.
But yeah, that was definitely a passing of the torch, even if Jerry Rice doesn't appreciate that day as much. But Terrell Owens, the moment that pops in my head for him are always like big moments, always big time moments in games. The Owens, Steve Young drop back slips against Green Bay. Jerry Rice come fumble on that drive. We ain't gonna say that too loud. Glad they didn't have instant replay back then. Yeah. But Terrell Owens making that play and getting up with the emotions and understanding what he went through throughout that game. I remember me as a kid saying, why do they keep throwing Terrell Owens the ball? He keeps dropping the ball. And then he makes the biggest catch. And I know how emotional I got then. And then you think a couple years later, 49ers get down big against the New York Giants. And Terrell Owens just been like, you know what? Don't worry, guys. We're down a lot of points right now. I'm going to put the team on my back. And what him and Garcia did for the rest of those games. So that was a big moment as well. And it felt like that was where he felt like he shined the most. And I think he's a little misunderstood. I think Terrell Owens was a guy who just always felt like if you gave him the opportunities, he would help you win a game. So when you weren't throwing to him, you would have to hear his mouth because he felt like, well, we're losing. You're not throwing me the ball. Just throw me the damn ball, and then we'll probably win. So I kind of had a different appreciation for his attitude towards wanting to win and the comparator he was. And I mean, he was just a big time playmaker at every level of the field. And one more thing, if you go and watch some highlights of him, you just realize how much of a yards after catch monster he was, throwing guys off of him, outrunning entire defenses. Terrell Owens is just a very special player on the Niners and really on some other teams as well.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too with Jerry Rice. It was like post Y2K, and Jerry was like the old guard of receiver, and then there's all this new school of wide receivers, and Randy Moss shows up, and he's 6'4" and leaping out of the building, and T.O. is just rocked up and huge, and you got like David Bostons that are, I don't want to say steroids, but there's like just huge wide receivers. Like, who are these guys, right? And I think that's why Jerry gets lost sometimes for young people who start seeing that, and like Jerry wasn't this freak of nature Megatron like Calvin Johnson. And T.O. was like one of those early, like, this guy's too. And I wonder how important it was for T.O. to be a young T.O. to be around Jerry Rice, and how much that work ethic rubbed off on him, because that competitor, that work ethic, I mean, it's what made both of those players great.
I'm pretty sure it has. I mean, I don't think there's a way that you can want to see Jerry Rice, but also be there, at practice. I used to go to these practices, man. I used to ride bus 5 of Verde Park in Stockton over to UOP and watch the 49ers training camp practices there, and see Terrell Owens running around in his biker pants, whatever you want to call them, the tights.
Yeah.
Watch Jerry Rice and how to prepare. But you also have guys like Steve Young. You also had JJ Stokes, guys that truly knew how to be professionals. And I definitely think that helped Terrell Owens, a guy that was a 3rd round pick out of Tennessee, Chattanooga, small school. You go to a program that is, hey, we win here, right? We win a lot of games. He went to a great opportunity for him to really be able to develop into the terrific receiver that he was.
All right. We got Jerry Rice, Terrell Owens, and I think, I mean, whether you look at just straight yardage, what he's meant to the 49ers with the Golden Heart Fund and being around the team, and then he was an executive in the NFL. Dwight Clark is, for me, number 3. Are you going to argue with Dwight Clark being number 3? He's also number 3 receiving yards all time for San Francisco 49ers. Part of like the early foundational Super Bowl squad too, which I think is important.
No argument there. You look what year he stopped playing for the 49ers, 1987. That was actually the year I was born. All right. So it's not like I got to watch Clark in a 49ers uniform live, but definitely just going back, watching any of the, the older moments and just watching him run routes, the way he ran routes, the way he used his body. I thought probably up until maybe 3 years ago, he was a tight end. Then I found out no, he was actually a receiver. But I mean, I don't think, when you think of 49ers, you think of Dwight Clark in that mix, right? It's like Jerry Rice, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Dwight Clark, and what he's meant to that organization.
And the most iconic play in 49ers history, the catch, the original catch. And so, beating the Cowboys too. So yeah, Dwight Clark for me is number 3. I think we're going to have to go old time a little bit here. Number 4 receiving yards is Gene Washington. And he was there from 69 to 77 with the San Francisco 49ers, 6,664 receiving yards. He is number 3, actually has more touchdown receptions at 59 than Dwight Clark even, who had 48. And so they swapped there in the 3 and 4 spot, very similar yardage totals within 100 yards or so of each other in yardage. A lot more catches, so shorter catches, downfield guy. That was what Gene Washington was. He was a big play downfield player. Broke into the league with the late 1960s 49ers in that John Brody squad. So Gene Washington.
For the next guys, are we going tight? Like, does tight ends, do they count, or are we going strictly receivers?
I think we should go strictly wide receivers here.
Okay.
Because we were talking off the air there. But yeah, George Kittle, top 5 all time in receiving yards for the San Francisco 49ers already. That's pretty wild. I didn't realize he was already up there. It's rarefied air for George Kittle where he is. And he's going to end up an all-timer. But if we're just talking wide receivers, next up as far as receiving yards, Croc, is the running mate for Jerry Rice as John Taylor. So we got to talk John Taylor. We got to talk new school. We got to talk J.J. Stokes, maybe. Going back to the 80s, Freddie Solomon, Michael Crabtree. What about Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk? Are they all-time wide receivers for the San Francisco 49ers? Where should they rank next? All right, I think we only have 4 names down, right? We got Jerry Rice, T.O., Dwight Clark, Gene Washington. And oddly enough, I think we could probably start talking about some of the newer school wide receivers. For me, growing up, the first wide receiver tandem I saw was Jerry Rice and John Taylor, and they were a perfect match. John Taylor with the big catch against the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl, played from 87 to 95 with the 49ers. Big return guy as well. He was just all legs, like, big thighs. It was like butt and long legs, and he could run. 5,598 career yards for John Taylor as the San Francisco 49er, number 5 as far as wide receivers go all time. He was passed recently by George Kittle on the all-time receiving list, though. John Taylor, number 5, Croc?
Okay, so I mean, yeah. I don't know if he can be number 5. Here's the argument for him. He was there during a pivotal time for the 49ers. It wasn't so spread out, right? Like, obviously they threw the ball a lot more than other teams, but you had 2 receivers, you had a tight end, you had split backs, right? You had like a true fullback and all that. But if we're just going off of like just numbers, those other guys are on his ass. Like Brandon Aiyuk is 1,600 yards behind John Taylor. But John Taylor played like 5 more years than where Aiyuk is. So, I mean, if you're just going to project, right, like what guy is going to be ahead in the all-time rankings, like Brandon Aiyuk, as long as he, pending contract situation, right? I mean, in 2 years for sure, he will really surpass John Taylor. So do we jump the gun and just be like, well, at this moment right now, because of the trajectory this guy is on, like Aiyuk is a better receiver? Or is it kind of hard because of the nostalgia, the Super Bowls, the times that we saw John Taylor, balling out in all those big games, is like, we got to wait till he actually passes him on paper.
Yeah. Is his impact more than what John Taylor's was? It would be we don't have to wait, I don't think, and we don't have to. As we were talking about Brock Purdy, he's had a 1 year, and we were putting him up there pretty darn high. We had Brock Purdy at 7 all time amongst 49ers. We're like, he's top 5. He does that again. That's 2 full seasons as a starter. He's already top 5 in the historic lineage of quarterbacks for the 49ers. So I don't think you have to have the most yards or play all the seasons if you've had a bigger impact. The question is, did he have a bigger impact? He didn't make catches in the Super Bowl to win the game like John Taylor, right? And didn't play as long. So for me, I would probably keep him behind John Taylor. And by the way, I was looking at just guys that were listed at wide receiver. There's another guy listed at right end, RE. And it's Billy Wilson, but he was a split end. He was a wide receiver way back in the 1950s. We're going back to Y.A. Tittle in those days. And he actually has more receiving yards than John Taylor. And he'd actually be the number 5 as far as wide receivers go in 49ers history for receiving yards, 5,902. So I skipped Billy Wilson, who's got to be part of this conversation. Freddie Solomon as well, if you're just talking about pure yards, part of the early 80s, first Super Bowl squads. You got Michael Crabtree, 4,300 receiving yards. J.J. Stokes, 4,100. Deebo Samuel, already right there, already top 10. In fact, Deebo and Brandon Aiyuk, as far as just wide receivers, are 10 and 11 in 49ers history receiving yards.
Yeah, they're right there. And the interesting thing with them is Deebo was drafted a whole year ahead of Aiyuk, right? 1 year, 2019, 2020. All right. But has only played, 6 more games? So he's about 200 yards ahead of Aiyuk. Like, those guys are close. And if you're asking me today, what guy will be a 49er longer, I would say Brandon Aiyuk. So I think with Deebo, who's kind of trending a little downward with his yardage, I think it'll be Brandon Aiyuk that continues to climb these charts a little bit more. Now, Deebo will climb some charts. He will surpass some guys, but I think Brandon Aiyuk has a better opportunity because if we're just projecting 2 years out, Aiyuk is going to be really climbing on this list. Over 2 years, I'd say, all right, hypothetically speaking, he has 2,000 more yards. Where does that put him over. If he just has 1,000 this year, 1,000 next year, that's right at Billy Wilson, who's at 5,900. Like, we're talking close, pushing top 5 for Brandon Aiyuk.
Right. Yeah. So for Aiyuk, 2,000 yards. Yeah, 2,000 yards puts him in top 5.
Well, I don't know if he'll be.
Is he going to resign? Is he going to play more than one more year at the 49ers too? So I don't know if we can project that necessarily. And you talk about John Taylor, like he wasn't the guy on those teams. You know, there was Brent Jones and there was Roger Craig, but you could say the same thing about Brandon Aiyuk. And was Deebo's impact, especially in that 2021 Super Bowl run season, what he did? We're not even counting his rushing yards too, just because his receiver. I think we still got to count the impact he has carrying the football, even if some of those are carries and not receptions. So to me, the biggest impact is still Deebo for making the engine run for the 49ers teams currently. And if they both their careers stop today, Deebo is ahead of Aiyuk for me.
And because of, and like Jerry Rice as well, which I don't have Jerry Rice's rushing numbers right here, but Rice has rushing yards, rushing touchdowns as well.
Mm-hmm.
Deebo, same ballpark, which is his impact. 2019 Super Bowl, he was likely going to be Super Bowl MVP if they just kept giving him the ball and they won. And then we saw his impact after that, you know, big year, 2021. 49ers should have won that game against the Rams, NFC Championship game. But you know, just it has felt like he has meant more to the offense. And even if you ask me, you know, the importance of the players, you know, if you're asking Kyle Shanahan, if you're like, all right, Croc, who's Kyle Shanahan prioritized? I'd be like, CMC, Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
Even today.
I think you're right.
And I remember Deebo missed a game or two last year, had another game where he had 0 targets because he kind of went, he was the game time decision, and it was clear like, we're only going to really use him if we have to. He had 0 targets over an entire game, and even then had like the same amount of touches as Brandon Aiyuk.
I think they're close. So Deebo and Aiyuk for me are kind of back to back, but I'm going to have Deebo ahead of Aiyuk. The question is, do they come in at like 5 and 6, or do they come in after Michael Crabtree, who's a couple hundred yards ahead of these guys? Michael Crabtree played, 6 years with the 49ers from 2009 to 2014, has more receptions and receiving yards than both Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel. Does he belong?
He missed a lot of season 2 with the Achilles.
Yeah.
And then he held out, I think, his rookie year. So there was some kind of lost time for Aiyuk.
At least one.
Crabtree.
Yeah. Then there's Freddie Solomon and Billy Wilson as well. And John Taylor. So I think just for me and growing up, and he was like part of the first group and he caught a Super Bowl winning catch. I think John Taylor for me is still hanging on to that 5 spot.
You got to go. I think you just have to go him until these other guys perform in a game with the same importance as John Taylor played in, and you get the same results that John Taylor had, which was Super Bowl win.
I don't want to respect my guy Billy Wilson here. 5,902 receiving yards, 400 receptions. RC Owens, he doesn't have the numbers, but he was he was only with 49ers for 3 or 4 years back in the Y.A. Tittle days, but they came up with the alley-oop. That was like the big thing. The alley-oop was Y.A. Tittle tossing it up to 6'3" RC Owens. And so should he be in consideration? There's a whole sports term that originated because of the San Francisco 49ers. And does that mean something, even though he didn't play that long? So it starts to get difficult when you start talking about, like, you know, RC Owens and Anquan Bolden and some of these other names later on the list. But Taylor is 5. I'm going to put Billy Wilson at 6 just because the sheer output, and it's hard to compare eras. And he led the league in receiving back then. And so I think that, and he was like a 6-time Pro Bowl or something in 10 years with the 49ers. He led the league in receiving. I think he's got to be up there, even though, you know, we don't have the same feels we have for these other guys that we actually saw play.
Some fun facts on RC Owens. All right. One, he was drafted in the 14th round. Yeah. Obviously he only has 7 rounds now, but he was the 160th pick. So now, you know, you got Brock Purdy, who was like 262 or something like that. So even though they went way more rounds, they didn't have as many teams when he came into the league in 1956. This is a guy that is from California, or excuse me, he was born in Shreveport, Louisiana. but his high school is Santa Monica, California. So he must have moved to California at one time, went to college in Idaho. But here's the fun fact here. He is a member of the 209. When he passed away, for whatever reason right here, it shows like where he died at. Manteca, California, right up the street from me in Stockton here.
Wow, Manteca.
Manteca.
The Bass Pro Shop. That's in Manteca, right?
That is the best. Yeah, they got a huge one right off the freeway.
RC Owens, I kind of want. So here's my list. This is what I have written down. We got Jerry Rice, Terrell Owens, Dwight Clark, Gene Washington, John Taylor, Billy Wilson, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, 7 and 8. And that's ahead of Freddie Solomon. That's ahead of Michael Crabtree, ahead of JJ Stokes. I'm just looking at the yardage list. I can't believe how high in just a couple short years, Anquan Bolden, he played 3 years in the Niners, right? 13, 14, 15. Yeah. 3 years, 3,000 yards, man. And he's up there.
I mean, he had some, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He was very, very, very productive. Had a huge game. I remember week 1 against the Green Bay Packers. One of those years, I think that might have been like 2014. So good times. Because when you got him, remember, they got him for a ham sandwich. What was it, 6th-round pick? And you're thinking like, oh, okay, maybe a little washed. Yeah. No, he actually was pretty dang productive for the Niners. And another fun fact, my guy, Lavelle Hawkins was in camp with the 49ers at this time. And Lavelle was like, he said it's so odd watching Anquan Bolden. He's like, he just looked like the most disgusting player out there. Like, wasn't running routes, wasn't getting any separation, but somehow he was just catching the rock. And he did that a lot for the 49ers in those few years.
And by the way, I'm not considering Isaac Bruce. I'm not considering guys that were Hall of Famers and did most of their work in other uniforms.
Randy Moss.
Kind of a list, no Randy Moss on this list. 9 and 10, RC Owens or Michael Crabtree, RC Owens, 9 and 10.
The Crabtree thing
weird because his numbers are up there, but was he more impactful in his era than Freddie Solomon was in the early 80s to Super Bowl winning teams? I think Solomon's got to go there.
The Crabtree thing was weird because I just never felt his impact. Even I remember like 2011 season. Like I don't remember him in that, that big Saints game. Like,
yeah.
Did he play in that game?
There's not a lot of big moments.
I remember Vernon Davis. I remember Alex Smith running for touchdowns. I don't remember Michael Crabtree.
Same, man. Same.
Now I remember in the might have been the next game against the New York Giants in the NFC Championship game. I remember like knowing that Crabtree was kind of the only receiver. There was a lot of guys hurt, but still like no impact from Crabtree in that game. And I could think of like Crabtree moments where it was like, man, like Crabtree did his thing here, man. That was cool. But I feel like it was just never like postseason work. Packers, cold weather. He came back off the Achilles. I want to say he had a decent game, but not a whole lot of memorable impact moments like where I have like T.O. that just sticks out, or even, guys like, Deebo that just sticks out.
Dave Parks. We got our guy Dick Witcher to play from 66 to 73, put up a few thousand yards.
Dick Witcher,
I'm gonna go RCO. That's an all-time name for sure. If we're doing an all-time names list of 49ers, got Clyde Connor, some good names back in the day. Mike Wilson, I remember in the old Tecmo Bowl days, but I'm going RC Owens ahead, even though Crabtree's got more yards. So Freddie Solomon, RC Owens, that's the top 10. I'm doing it.
Nice.
There we go. There's your all-time San Francisco 49ers wide receivers, according to Peacock. Let us know what we got wrong. Let us know if you're an old timer and you saw some of these older guys play, and if we're giving too much credit to the younger generation. At BD Peacock, at Crocky209. Drop a comment on YouTube. Subscribe while you're there. Of course, you can find us everywhere you find your podcasts. Croc and I back tomorrow, right here, Locked On 49ers.